Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and welcome. I'm very pleased to be joined by Stuart Broadley. Stuart is the Chief Executive Officer of the EIC. The EIC is the Energy Industries Council, which is a global trade body representing the energy value chain. So welcome, Stuart. Thank you for joining me.
Nice to see you.
You're going to be speaking at the upcoming World Hydrogen UK Congress, I think 9th to the 11th of April. But as I said, you have a worldwide remit representing the value chain, and you bring a lot of experience to your role. You've got a background both on the gas side with I guess wood, but also on the renewables side with Senvion, and so you probably have a quite a sort of unique position looking at the energy transition. And what are some of your sort of opening thoughts around where we are in the energy transition, and what are some of the important I guess aspects to the transition that your members are saying to you?
Yeah, thanks. And yeah, it's true. I did have 20 years in multiple different energy sectors, oil and gas and conventional power, and then I went into renewables and then into downstream compression. And it's probably why I ended up in this job at EIC, which is now the sixth largest energy supply chain trade association in the world. We're lucky enough to have nearly 1,000 members across the whole value chain, across all energy sectors, and yeah, all over the world. And definitely a lot of what I'm learning in this role, and I've been in this role for 8 years, is when you're in the energy supply chain, you need not just to read about the project opportunity and to hear the policymaker tell you, get excited, this is coming. You
Mm.
actually need to be able to bid on real projects before you start to believe this is real. And I think a lot of companies have worked hard to position themselves to be ready for the tidal wave of opportunity that is coming, but have been then disappointed with how little real energy transition related work is coming, or when it does come, how low margin often that work is. So one of the pieces of data we have in EIC is linked to FID rates, so final investment decision rates. And we track 14,500 projects around the world that are all energy sectors
Mhm.
and are projects that have been announced and are somewhere in that development cycle, from announced, not started, to right the way through to just finishing construction and about to hand the keys over to
Mhm.
the owner. When you look at all those projects, it's really very stark and very revealing the difference between the ambition of how many of those projects are energy transition net zero related versus which is the majority of those projects, by the way,
Yeah.
versus how many of those projects are actually fully funded. And if you like, I mean, I can give you a couple of stats that are kind of
Mm.
revealing with that.
Yeah,
So
yeah, please.
most
Yeah.
people don't know, but of all the energy sectors that are out there, the most funded sector is new nuclear right now. 50% of
Wow.
all the world's new nuclear, so it's large scale nuclear projects, are fully funded. And this is really interesting, right? And most people don't know
Yeah.
that. And it's because nuclear is now kind of taxonomy wise regarded as clean in
Mm.
many nations of the world. And it's kind of guaranteed baseload power. So a lot of countries are going that route to achieve net zero, countries that otherwise previously would not. The next sector, which has the highest FID rate, is oil and gas. If you kind of group upstream, midstream, downstream LNG into one sector,
Yeah.
overall, about 20% of all those projects announced are already funded. And we kind of understand the reasons for that, don't we, around energy security and so on.
Yeah.
And definitely an under investment in oil and gas for the previous 10 years. So it's a bit of a correction happening in oil and gas.
Mhm.
But then you look at, where does hydrogen fit in that? Because hydrogen seems to be one of those where every day another hydrogen project's announced.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, only about, so it kind of depends a little bit on how you define it, but say 3 to 5% of all the hydrogen projects announced have actually reached FID, so fully funded. So FID you could define as, the funding's available, the access to the grid is available, the supply chain is seen as competent and ready. So all the kind of barriers that are in the way, regulatory approval, off takers in place are signed off by that project owner to say, yeah, we're ready to go. And then it's announced as FID. So 3 to 5% of all the hydrogen projects funded. What that means, if you're in the supply chain, means, hey, we hear all these projects, but I have to try and win 3 to 5%, a chance, a small share of the 3 to 5%
Mm.
of all the projects that are actually out there. And by the way, most of these projects are small trial size projects as well.
Yeah.
So I think the truth is we've got a long way to go
Yeah.
to bridge the gap between ambition and reality.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think you're right. Obviously, ambition and announcing a project, you just sort of press print on the printer, and there's obviously a long way to go from that to getting FID. And I guess specifically, you'd say that the initial thing is the newness of the industry, as it were. Yes, they are proven technologies, but putting them together and the systems integration is just, there's just not that body of operational data. There's not, the familiarity from the finance community. They're unable to take those risks on technology at scale. Yet it has to build up slowly.
I'm not sure though. Not sure though. It is mainly about technology readiness. That is a factor in it.
Yeah.
I think it's predominantly there's not enough demand for new hydrogen. So most of the projects announced are supply side push. So they're developers saying, we can do that. We have the technology and, we have the funding available to set up a project, and often triggered by a country's net zero roadmap that includes hydrogen. So you then get developers inside countries saying, yeah, we'll be one of the green hydrogen, blue hydrogen, whatever project developers that meets our country's commitment.
Yeah.
But you need an off-taker. You need someone that's then willing to pay for it and has a demand for it, because don't forget, hydrogen is well supplied already in the world today. Obviously classically mainly grey hydrogen. So until we get really new and funded and profitable demand for hydrogen on a sustained long-term basis, I mean significantly more hydrogen, then most of these projects have nowhere to go.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, clearly developing a new product, and you need to develop demand at the same time as you're developing supply, and that's probably I guess a unique challenge that we haven't really faced before. I mean, but back in the day when there was the dash for gas, how did that evolve on the demand side? What sort of learnings do you think you were from that sort of era?
Well, I think that firstly, you're dealing then with an industry that was still driven by an established, well-funded industry. So the gas supply industry was managed by the oil industry.
Right.
And so that industry, well-funded, good infrastructure in place, well plugged into all the government agencies, without the conflict which we now deal with of, well, net zero seems to be, does it comply with or conflict against the oil and gas industry? Back then, it didn't feel like that. So there was a lot of synergy there, and I think that helped. There was clearly a demand as well. As coal was being phased out, gas was seen as the transition fuel, if you remember that language, and it all made sense. If you like, the industry stepped up and made investments. And if you like, often the oil companies were not only the supply side, also they were the demand side. They were then demanding the gas that was required, and they could partner around the world to then do that. So now it's a totally different thing, right? So now the oil industry is involved, but the supply side, if you look at a lot of the projects that have been announced, they're if we're talking specifically hydrogen, they're green hydrogen. And why are they green hydrogen? Because there's a lot of the finance organizations and a lot of the policymakers take a view that they want, renewably powered creation, of hydrogen through electrolysis. And that comes from a kind of a sort of sense of not wanting to involve the oil industry. And that's kind of still a harsh reality, which is we have still not a fully integrated collaborative approach as an industry towards how we solve net zero, still a bit divisive. And definitely our view is actually we all need to kind of stop that kind of language of there's a good and a bad player in this. In order to achieve net zero, we all have to work together. The whole supply chain and all the technologies out there that come from oil and gas provide the answers now to deliver hydrogen. And we need to perhaps learn the lessons from how gas and LNG grew so quickly, it was a fully integrated solution. Everybody played their part. And that will be the way we do it this time as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say that the initial sort of push with green hydrogen obviously comes from a lot of countries that don't have a gas industry and are looking to capture, more of the value chain in situ in their country, in their GDP. But yeah, as you sort of go through and talk about UK, obviously speaking in London at the World Hydrogen UK event, what are your thoughts there specifically with the UK environment? There we are seeing opportunities in low carbon hydrogen, as it's now seems to be called, as well as the green hydrogen side.
UK is seen around the world, and I'm very lucky to have a role which is a global role, and I travel around the world meeting with energy ministries and boardrooms, of all types of energy companies around the world. And the kind of consistent view is UK is a great place to do business, has been genuine leaders in the net zero journey so far. And I think the latest stats show that the UK is the first country to more than halve its emissions. I think back to this 1990 reference point. So around the world, that is seen as a great success, and the UK is seen as a place to do business and a place to invest in. So I think from that point of view, UK is really well placed, and what an opportunity we have to continue the progress we've made. There is a bit of a but, unfortunately, which is we've sort of lost a bit of ground. We've sort of slowed down a bit through kind of sort of tripping on our own, feet a little bit. So I guess we're really hopeful that, this is, I suppose, election year, which also doesn't help. And, I think 49% of the world's population has an election year this year. So that definitely is not helping with progress, but we're hoping that consistency, continuity of energy policy returns. There's this, it doesn't matter who you speak to in the supply chain, they will all say the same thing when you ask them the question, what do you need from government right now? They will say, can we just have a stable, consistent energy policy with a clear roadmap to net zero? We understand and respect the fact that there are legally binding ultimate net zero targets, but we don't understand anymore how to get there because so few of the projects that have been announced are actually coming through to us in the supply chain back to this point because they're just not getting funded for lots of reasons, lack of capacity, lack of grid, et cetera, et cetera. So we've just got to get back to the point where there is much more stability and continuity, cross-party, through cycle energy policy stability so that investors can rebuild their confidence in investing with a little bit more risk. Because right now investors are back to, well, I'm not going to invest until I absolutely have an off-taker and absolutely have everything in place. Whereas if we have more stability, investors are more likely to say, I'm going to believe in this. I will put some risk on the table and invest. That's not there so much right now. And that's hurting the UK, not just the UK, to be fair. Many countries in the world are facing the same dilemma of with kind of repaying the COVID debt and with energy security concerns and no longer able to feel they can just kick the can down the road of who's going to pay for net zero. Now it is consumers today are realizing they have to pay with already high costs of, high inflation and high interest rates. They're not going to pay anymore without the story being explained. And that requires, again, the campaign of why it's important, which comes from energy policy being consistent. All these kind of elements are sort of a little bit fragmented right now, and we urgently need all of that to be put back as strong and consistent and stable. And it just needs to not be party political, right? Energy policy cannot be party political.
As they say in America, bipartisan and not politicizing, the energy industry and certainly makes a lot of sense. In terms of, you mentioned before off camera around collaboration, and I was just interested around your thoughts around that in terms of specifically UK, Europe. We've seen that I think the Viking link is up now, and opportunities for collaboration across the North Sea. You were probably referring to before around UK's leading role in offshore wind. What are your thoughts there for the UK and also thinking specifically around hydrogen?
So it's a global, increasingly globally integrated energy solution that's required for us to achieve net zero, right? And it's also an increasingly globally integrated energy value chain and supply chain. It's very hard now, for a country who is faced now with real energy security concerns, with, various conflicts and risks around the world. It feels like it's getting a less and less safe world to be in right now. It naturally leads countries to feel like, I have to focus internally. And actually it leads investors and boardrooms to feel like they have to focus internally. We feel that's a very dangerous sort of journey to go down, because firstly, the market inside your country is not big enough to sustain all of the industries and the skills that you have. You need a healthy international trading nation, and you need countries that are friends. not foes, and they work together and they solve problems together and they collaborate on issues, whether it's interconnectors, as an example, or whether it is just collaborating together to solve some of the world's amazing technology challenges that we now have to deal with to achieve net zero.
Yeah.
This cannot be done in one country, and it needs collaborative and trade-based approaches to finding solutions. So I guess we're always hoping, and we're always working very hard through our international global community of members, that we kind of go beyond our sense of energy security means we look inward and we say, okay, there is a way of doing both. We understand our country and our needs as a country to have both energy security and affordable journeys to net zero, which often countries have a very unique journey for that, because some have a lot of natural resources, some don't, some have a lot of wind, some don't, and so on. So it naturally is a country by country solution. But then the answers to that in terms of how do I get the supply chain and how do I offset carbon and all the other solutions that enable us to get there are always collaborative. Countries and companies that have been having to work together, help each other, build trade and trust. And ultimately, when you have trading, trusting nations, you then have more chance of peaceful nations. So we actually think at the heart of net zero is a drive for peace. So that sounds like a kind of very sort of ethereal thing to say, but we actually increasingly feel like net zero is a way of bringing everybody back to the table to solve some of these great problems.
Yeah. Indeed, wise words, Stuart. Fascinating to talk to you. Fascinating to get your insight, and yeah, certainly looking forward to hearing and meeting you face to face. Come April and World Hydrogen UK. So yeah, we look forward to also supporting the work of the EIC and indeed certainly driving, the energy transition globally has always been a mission here at World Hydrogen Leaders. So yeah, we look forward to collaborating with you as we go into what are, as you outline, a huge set of challenges in terms of achieving net zero and balancing energy security and indeed affordability and in what is seems to be an ever more dangerous world. So many thanks, Stuart. Stay safe, and we look forward to meeting you face to face, as I said.
Thank you. Likewise.
Cheers. Take care. Bye bye.